one of the mistakes they should learn from was the drafting of Jalen Hurts. And
You're listening to the Jacob Media Sports Network in partnership with AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Subscribe to the Jacob Media channel on YouTube for access to all daily sports content.
All right, welcome back to The Fix, and you heard the man. Make sure you subscribe to the Jacob Media YouTube channel, JAKIB Media. You can find all of John's work at the Jacob Media YouTube channel. Some of my work, too, but John's more important. So let's bring John into the fold now. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com, host of Extending the Play every Saturday at 10 a.m. right here on 1490. John, how was your weekend?
Good. Championship Sunday. I don't know if I'm more important, though, Ryan. Don't disparage yourself.
Yeah, you're right. I take it back. All right, so before we eventually get to some Eagles talk, let's get John's thoughts on Championship Sunday. Tom Brady, death, taxes, and Tom Brady. So your thoughts on both games?
Yeah, pretty amazing. Preseason I picked Tampa Bay and Kansas City to be in the Super Bowl. Then I kind of begged out because Green Bay was playing so well. And I think what happened is what always happens in that type of situation when you do have the upset. The Packers didn't play their A game, and Tampa Bay played very well. And they certainly deserved to win that football game, and that's obviously a very difficult environment to win in. But the Packers had plenty of chances, and just it was one of those things. I mean, even Rodgers to Adams, which had been so dominating all season, kind of fell apart at the biggest moment. Matt LaFleur just awful coaching down the stretch of that game. And then on the other side, too much too soon, I guess, for Buffalo. Great season, but they just weren't in the same class as the Kansas City Chiefs.
No, they weren't. That game, it really was never close. Neither game was that close. But just real quick on Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. So that was Rodgers' fourth NFC Championship loss in the last 7 years. And, of course, the talk today was amped up about Aaron Rodgers getting out of Green Bay. Your thoughts there, and if you agree, where could he end up?
Well, I've been telling you all year, he does not like that organization. I definitely think he would like out. Easier said than done. For some of the same reasons the Eagles can't get rid of Carson Wentz right now, except he's playing very well. So obviously there would be teams dying, especially teams that think they're a quarterback away to try to pry him away. But I don't think it's financially feasible this early. 2022 is probably, I think, the earliest the Packers can get out of it from a cap and dead money standpoint. And again, that's the wrong terminology. That's the terminology we use with Carson Wentz. It's just a matter of, he's a disgruntled player that doesn't like an organization, and he'd probably like to move on. But it's easy to say that. Now, he's the type of guy, though. I mean, as much as I praise him as a player, he's the type of guy who can make things really difficult, and that could change everything. Because if you really want to do something in pro sports, modern pro sports, Deshaun Watson's in the same category. If you're going to be so difficult that there's no other option, and Antonio Brown was another example of this when he was still playing at a high level, sometimes teams just have to get rid of you. So we'll see how Aaron handles this. But, yeah, I've been telling you all year, and I told you guys on the radio when the Eagles played, he texted Zach Ertz and said, where are we going to play together next year? He does not like that organization.
Yeah, that's going to be a story all off season long, so we'll be tracking it. John, let's start talking Eagles, and you have to fill us in on a lot, my friend. We have the head coach landing into the new Eagles nest. Eagles found an offensive coordinator. Deuce Staley moves on. So fill us in on everything. You can start wherever you want.
Well, I think the most interesting part, I certainly for fans, is the fact that, Nick Sirianni is being given the opportunity to choose his own coaches. And I think it's pretty ironic, at least on the surface, and I wrote about this on Sports Illustrated why, but, it's kind of hard to explain. A 39-year-old first-time head coach versus a Super Bowl winner. One guy gets to choose his coaches, the other guy doesn't. The Eagles are what they are at this point, and that's why, obviously, really the only coach they were able to talk Nick into keeping would be Jeff Stoutland, and that's a big one. But others, as you mentioned, Deuce Staley, that's, more of, he finally saw the writing of the wall and knew he hit the glass ceiling here. And if he wants to get to his ultimate goal of being a head coach in this league, he had to leave. He just had to leave this organization. And he'll be going out to Detroit with Dan Campbell biting some kneecaps out there in the biggest football guys coaching staff in the NFL. Dave Phipp, I think, is also going to end up in Detroit, and that's the other coach the Eagles probably would have liked Nick to keep, but he wants to go in a different direction. It's going to be interesting, man. I mean, you mentioned the offensive coordinator, very limited experience, took over for Ken Wisenhunt. And then last season was the offensive coordinator with Justin Herbert. Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, first-time defensive coordinator. Not a lot of experience on this coaching staff, and that should scare some people.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the Eagles let Sirianni, pick his staff. When I first saw the Eagles went the direction they did with the offensive coordinator, it seemed like, okay, this makes sense, that it appears that he picked him, but maybe he really didn't. Maybe I'm just overanalyzing that. But that was clearly Sirianni's guy then, right?
Yeah, they worked together with the Chargers, Shane Steichen, and they're very close, actually. And that was really the one hire I was told about pretty early in the process he would want and would target. And there was some question because obviously the Chargers have a new head coach and Brandon Staley, so you had to wait and see. He was under contract, but normally a new coach would go in a different direction. He did, and he became available. And also Gannon was a pretty early focus that people who knew Nick would assume he would want to bring over. If you look around the league at these young coaching hires, and it really started with Sean McVay, who's the youngest of them all when he was hired, and pretty much still is the youngest. He was so young when he was hired. There's been a theme, and that theme is to marry these first-time coaches with veteran guys. And with Sean McVay, it was Wade Phillips. If you look at a Matt LaFleur, it was Mike Pettin. If you look at a Matt Nagy, it was Vic Fangio. Even here, Doug's not as young, but he was first-time rookie head coach. It was Jim Schwartz. Guys who had either been head coaches in the past or, in Fangio's case, ultimately became a head coach, but, has been a coordinator, had been a coordinator forever. Here it's just, whew, young guy. And look, maybe it's Vince Lombardi, Jim Johnson, and Bill Walsh, but I got to tell you, I would want some veteran leadership, and maybe the Eagles look at Jeff Stoutland as somebody who could provide that. But it's certainly rare to go this direction.
John, something that I've noticed, and correct me if I miss something here, I haven't seen any Eagles players take to social media, and this is the current world we live in, but like it's just been quiet, like with the hirings and the new coaching staff. So I bring that up because I just want your opinion on how do you feel the locker room is handling all of this? What do you think their overall opinion is with all of the new guys coming in on the coaching staff?
I do think I saw a little bit from Lane Johnson, I think. I'm not even sure, actually. I think he tweeted something out. But, yeah, it's been mostly quiet. I think a lot of guys, remember, a lot of guys lobbied for Deuce Staley. And this is one of also the concerns, and really this is not Nick's fault, certainly, is the fact that, he comes in a situation where Jeffrey Lurie talks a certain way and is always, basically paid lip service to the Rooney Rule and taking a look at good minority candidates, and he doesn't hire them. I don't know any other way to describe it. I mean, he hasn't hired a head coach or a coordinator who's African-American since Ray Rhodes. It's been over 2 decades. And he talks about it. In a lot of ways, I think he hurts himself by going so over the top. I mean, some of these other owners who don't do it, at least they ignore it, and it doesn't become, in other words, he only exacerbates the situation. Yeah. And then you have, again, a large portion of the locker room. And remember, this league is 69% African-American. Is lobbying for Deuce Staley, and he goes another direction. And by the way, I don't think Jeffrey Lurie does this purposefully. He thinks this is the best candidate, but he doesn't handle it well by the way he talks about these issues. And I think Nick's walking into this, and I think it's a difficult situation. And then on top of it, you have the quarterback controversy. He's got to deal with that. He's got to deal with just a dearth of talent on the roster. And what I just mentioned before about he's a rookie head coach who doesn't really have a lot of experience at his coordinator positions. I mean, this guy's facing a lot of hurdles.
Yeah, welcome to Philly. John, no combine, no private workouts. There's a Senior Bowl.
That's another hurdle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that I want your thoughts on it because the Senior Bowl is this Saturday. So because of no combine, no private workouts, does the ante become upped for this year's Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have very limited opportunities to do your due diligence on these prospects. As you mentioned, no combine. The pro days are going to be. You're going to have limits on how many people can attend. So it is sort of a whole new world. And the Eagles didn't handle it well last season. Hopefully they learned from that and can handle things a little bit better this season, and not only the draft, but also, it's very unlikely that we're going to have an off season. It's going to be just like last year. Everything's going to be virtual probably until training camp. So whoever are the rookies and the first-year players, they're going to be just like the rookies and the first-year players this year. And, they're going to be up against it. And, again, the Eagles did not handle that well. I think that was one of the most disappointing parts of this season because we all thought they would have the advantage in the NFC East. It turned out to be anything but that. And, we'll just have to wait and see how they handle it this time. Hopefully they learn from some of the mistakes, identified some of the mistakes, and can fix them. But certainly from an evaluation standpoint, and remember, this has been going on. You know, in a pre-COVID world, you have your area scouts at all these colleges and doing work, and that was scaled back dramatically. So it's everybody's up against it.
That had to have been a question that was asked, right? Like, what's your, not that that's a be-all, end-all, because COVID, we don't think is going to be here permanently, but, you know, how are you going to manage this limited schedule, this challenging, shortened off season, right? Like, or are they just going to rely on Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman to figure that out?
Well, you would think, yeah. I mean, you would think it was asked and answered, and you know, I mean, the Eagles had a plan last year. I think everybody did, but you know, it came down to who handled it the best, not who, you know, maybe came up with the best ideas in the brainstorming session. It's just like on the field, it's about execution. And clearly, whatever plan the Eagles had, they didn't execute it well. And other teams certainly did. I mean, you look at Tampa Bay's going to the Super Bowl. We talked about Tom Brady leaving New England. You know, maybe you know, Tom had those workouts that he probably shouldn't have had. And you know, Tampa Parks. You know, you find a way. I talked about Carson Wentz. You know, we all try to figure out why did Carson Wentz have this historic regression. You know, one of my theories is he didn't do a damn thing this offseason.
Yeah.
And that's a guy who needs to be doing extra work. Whereas I said, you know, Tom Brady's ignoring public health officials and working at 43 years old. And people are going to rip him for that. People have already ripped him for that. But, you know, you got to pay a price for greatness. You can't just sit around.
No, it's true, and I remember talking a lot about that with you when it happened regarding Brady, and we've talked a lot about, you know, Carson Wentz, what's wrong? Did he do enough in the offseason? Did he do nothing? New father, COVID, you know, whatever. It's who knows what was going on, but we'll see if this new regime can get everything back on track. We're talking with John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider, for your night on at JF McMullen. So is the Senior Bowl the next thing on the list? And we've touched on that already, so we can maybe go past that and say, what's the next item of business here on the agenda for the Eagles and the new coaching staff?
Well, the next item is everybody's going to be introduced at some point this week. Later this week is what the Eagles described over the weekend. So I expect Wednesday or Thursday, Nick Sirianni will actually be introduced to Philadelphia and meet with reporters for the first time virtually. And then I mentioned, I would imagine Shane and Jonathan Gannon would be after that. And you got to fill out the rest of the staff. There's, as I mentioned, Jeff Stoutland's back. We know the passing game coordinator. We know Tracy Rocker's going to be the D-line coach, but plenty of other positions still to be filled. The Senior Bowl is always big with that as far as assistant coaches, sort of a and then again affects the COVID world because it's usually a convention for coaches looking for work. And by the way, that goes both ways because, you know, Press Taylor's not coming back, Matt Burke's not coming back. All the old position coaches, they have to look for new jobs around the league. So all that still has to shake out. And, yeah, it's plenty going on. Let's put it that way. More going on now than during the season.
Yeah, and that seems to be, you know, that's the case, as we all know, but it just seems to be more and more so. Each and every offseason just gets crazier, more hectic, more to talk about, more drama. You know, the list goes on and on. John, what, you know, why don't you fill us in a little bit more on the OC? I can't even say his last name. Shane Steichen?
Shane Steichen.
Steichen.
Yeah.
All right, I nailed it.
And he, as I mentioned, Ken Wisenhunt was the offensive coordinator out there with the Chargers, got fired in the 2019 season. He took over as the interim guy and then got the full-time job. Remember, Anthony Lynn was the head coach, and he's an offensive background. So it's one of those deals, and that's what we, kind of like Nick Sirianni himself, who's an offensive coordinator under an offensive head coach in Frank Reich. So it's that type of situation. And obviously, before Sirianni went back with Frank Reich, he was with Steichen with the Chargers. And that's where Sirianni first met Frank Reich before he left the Chargers and came to the Eagles. So they've known each other for a long time, and we'll see how it works out. I would imagine, ironically, sort of the setup in Indianapolis was the setup here as Doug Peterson had with Frank Reich. And obviously Doug was the play caller, and Frank was heavily involved with game planning. Out in Indianapolis, Frank was the play caller, and Nick was heavily involved in game planning, and I expect Nick to be the play caller here and Steichen to be more of a game plan offensive coordinator. So it's interesting. You try to move on from, I talk about the pendulum theory all the time when it comes to coaches. Usually when you move on from a coach, you go in the opposite direction. The Eagles have gone in the exact same direction in a lot of ways.
All right, so we both mentioned the to-do list for Nick Sirianni. It's the quarterback situation, Carson Wentz, the lack of talent on the roster, meddling owner. I know there's a couple other things, young coaching staff. If you have to say, John, the most important, and yeah, it's the quarterback, but if it is the quarterback, how does Sirianni go about fixing that problem then? Like, what needs to change? What would you change this offseason and even into the early parts of the regular season to try and right this ship and calm the storm, the media storm and the fan storm regarding the quarterback controversy or anything else?
Well, I talked about the Eagles learning from their mistakes. One of the mistakes they should learn from was the drafting of Jalen Hurts and this nonsense of having two quarterbacks. You never have a quarterback if you say you have two quarterbacks. So I want to make a decision. I don't care what your decision is, but the Eagles have to make a decision and move forward in that direction. Again, the financial aspect of it makes it more likely that Carson Wentz will be the starter, and then everybody's got to get behind that and move in one direction. I think the worst thing you could hear if you're an Eagles fan is we're going to have an open quarterback competition. I think that would be a disaster. And ultimately, I think at that point, Carson Wentz would further try to push himself out anyway. But so that's the first order of business, the Eagles, and that has to do with far more than Nick Sirianni. It's not like he's going to come in and say, okay, I want Carson. I mean, that's an organizational decision, and that's probably above his pay grade. But, the last thing you want is a quarterback controversy. And then, the second part is, look, and I'll go back to Championship Sunday. I would dare say, and I'm going to say, Matt LaFleur is one of the worst coaches in this league.
Wow.
One of the worst coaches in this league, and he's won 80% of his games because he's got the MVP playing quarterback. Talent wins in this league. So if you get talent, I don't care who you are, you're going to win a significant amount of games. You might not win the Super Bowl because you make idiotic decisions, but you're going to win a lot more than you lose. And the Eagles have to upgrade their personnel, and they got to get younger at the same time. And I have to answer a lot of questions. Is Jason Kelce going to come back? Is he going to retire? what do you do with some of these older players? And do you restructure Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox? Do you look to move in different directions? The offensive line, Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson, injuries on top of high salaries and aging players. A lot of decisions have to be made by Howie Roseman, and they got to turn over this roster. And obviously, they got to start finding difference makers from a talent perspective. They should be able to get one at number 6 overall.
Yeah, and that's the everyone's screaming wide receiver. And I know I've asked you this already, but real quick, I mean, is there any chance the Eagles go a different direction? Of course there is. It's the Eagles. But, what do you see playing out for the 6th overall pick?
I mean, at 6, you take the best player.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And obviously, if it's a quarterback and the Eagles decide to move on, maybe they even consider that. That's very unlikely. And if it's a quarterback, it's more likely they would trade out of that spot and trade down and try to accumulate picks because they got a lot of holes they got to fill. Now, the problem with that is it falls off pretty quickly. I mean, you look at the history of this, you got to be really bad to miss that early in the draft. Typically, there's a few bad years, but not many. If you're going to have the 6th overall pick, you should be able to get a really good football player at some point. But you know what? You fall back and you say, we're going to trade down to 11 or 12. It gets a lot trickier, a lot more quickly than you would imagine. So those are kind of the things you have to weigh. But, yeah, I mean, they have so many holes. Everything is on the table. Although with an offensive head coach with a background in receiver, as a receiver, he played receiver in college. He was a receiver coach. Man, they got to fix that position. And they aren't going to fix it with what they have. I'll say that.
John McMullen joins the Fix every night at 10:30 for your nightly football fix. Follow him at JF McMullen on Twitter, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com. And you can listen to Extending the Play. John is the host every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. John, give me your way too early Super Bowl outlook here. You predicted it in the summer, and then you backtracked on Friday, and now here we are. So your thoughts?
Yeah, now I'm going to give everybody a gift because it's way too early, but Tampa Bay is going to win the Super Bowl. And the reason why has nothing to do with Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. It's got to do with Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett and the fact that Eric Fisher tore his Achilles. Mm-hmm. And that Kansas City offensive line is a mess. Yep. If they got Mike Remmers playing left tackle, I'm going to induct Andy Reid into the Hall of Fame right then and there if they can win with that offensive line.
Yeah, just give him the Hall of Fame jacket, right there at halftime or end of the game, whatever. Yeah, we'll be talking a lot about the Super Bowl, John. A couple weeks to do it, and of course, plenty of Eagles talk here, not dying down even in the slightest as we get deeper into the Eagles offseason, not the NFL offseason. All right, John, we'll do it again tomorrow, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yep. All right, there he is, J-Mac. Luke, your thoughts?
He's great.
I know.
John's great.
He is great.
I was busy following the playoff teams over the weekend. I didn't realize this guy, John Gannon, was hired as defensive coordinator, so I was looking up some info on him.
Yeah.
So all 3 coaches, DC, OC, and Sirianni, all in their 30s.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't like that.
No.
I don't like that.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with John's point of you hire the Sean McVays, and you pair him with Wade Phillips, or you hire Matt Nagy and you pair him with Pagano most recently, and then Vic Fangio before that.
Right.
Yeah, these guys have never. We talk a lot about, is the role of the head coach more as a drill sergeant, as like a military leader, or is the role more play calling? And it seems like none of these three guys are going to check the drill sergeant box. Like, one of them needs to be the hard ass and like instill fear in the players. And if all three of them are just kind of the strategy guys and no one's instilling fear, and like you can show up to practice at 8:14 when practice starts at 8, and you can show up to the gym at 3:20 and you should have been in the gym at 3, like that starts to creep in quick.
Yep.
And if there's no, quote unquote hard ass Bill Belichick, Wade Phillips, all those guys, it becomes a different locker room. So
yeah, I'm with you.
Concerning.
It's very concerning. We'll talk more about it in the second hour. We'll also shift back to NFL Super Bowl, a little bit of yesterday recap. Much more on the other side with Luke Burgandy. Keep it locked in. We're live in the Prop Swap Studios. Quick break.